7-2, some difference in cofunction identities. These identities are used often. Sometimes they're hard to remember, but we'll try the little tricks. Okay, so here's a summary of the identities, and one of the things I want you to think about is if you're looking at sine right here of x plus y, you want to know that sine is very social. So in other words, it will work with cosine. So that kind of helps you to remember that one. Now, one of the things you want to remember with cosine is not social. It only likes to hang out with itself. So it only has cosine and sine. They don't get along. And with tangent, don't really have a trick for tangent. I guess if you think of tangent, it's a ratio of sine over cosine. So something to think about maybe there is that you're dealing with the ratio. Okay, the difference, it's pretty much the same thing. If you saw with the sine, you had sine x plus y, and so in the middle you had a plus. Now you've got sine x minus y, so in the middle you're going to have minus. And remember that the sine is social. With the cosine, it's not social, and so because of that, it has like a negative personality when other people are positive. And so when other people are negative, it has a positive personality. I guess that's how I remember it. I always make up these little cliche things. All right, so the first one we're going to go through is using the difference identity. So the identity that we're going to use here is, I'm going to go in blue, is the cosine of x minus y. Okay, the cosine of x minus y. Remember that cosine is not social, so it's on its own. Cosine x, cosine y, and if everybody's negative, it's always positive. So sine x, sine y. And all you're really doing is you're replacing your y with pi. So we've got the cosine of x, cosine of pi, plus the sine of x, sine of pi. All right, so we need to figure out what is the cosine of pi. And if you remember on your unit circle, we're talking about right here, cosine is x, so cosine is going to be your x, so therefore cosine x and cosine of pi is going to be -1 plus the sine of x, and then the sine of pi. Sine at this point, this is -1, 0. Sine is y, so it's 0. What you end up with is negative cosine x. All right, we're done with that one. Now it's your turn to try, so go ahead and pause and I'll put the steps on how to do this. Okay, so here's the answer. Just remember to use your circle. Next one, we're going to do example number 2. Now, the problem here is we don't know of a triangle that has 75-degree angle. That's not one of our common ones. So what we want to do is try to find a way to make it 75. So we're going to use the sum identity, and we're going to say the tangent of 30 plus 45 degrees. That gives me 75. Using that, what I've got now, don't forget your identity of the tangent of x plus the tangent of y all over 1 minus the tangent of x tangent of y. I'm just going to plug in my values. Here's my x, here's my y. So I've got the tangent of 30 degrees plus the tangent of 45 degrees all over 1 minus the tangent of 30 degrees and the tangent of 45 degrees. What we need now are our triangles. So if we go ahead and do, we've got one that's going to be the 30, 60, 90. So this is the square root of 2. This is, excuse me, that's 2. This is 2, this is 1, and this is the square root of 3. And then the other triangle we're going to need is the 45. That's 1, 1, square root of 2. Okay, so the tangent of 30. Remember, you're going from here, and tangent is opposite over adjacent. So we've got 1 over the square root of 3 plus, now we're going to be right here, and the tangent of 45 is opposite over adjacent. So we've got 1 over 1 all over 1 minus, okay, again, the tangent of 30 was 1 over the square root of 3, and the tangent of 45 is 1 over 1. So what we've got is 1 over the square root of 3 plus 1 all over 1 minus 1 over the square root of 3. All right, let's make ourselves a little bit more room. I'm just going to move this up here so I've got some room to work. Okay, so remember that we're not afraid of fractions anymore. So what you would want to do for the top here, okay, let's work with the top only, is you want to get a common denominator. Make it one fraction on the top. Our common denominator is the square root of 3. So what I'm going to have is 1 over the square root of 3 plus, and if you think of 1, it's the square root of 3 over the square root of 3. That's going to give you 1 plus the square root of 3 over the square root of 3. All right, now let's do the bottom. The bottom says 1 minus 1 over the square root of 3. So our common denominator is going to be the square root of 3. Square root of 3 over square root of 3 is 1. So what we have on the bottom is the square root of 3 minus 1 over the square root of 3. Remember the properties of fractions. All we're doing is we're taking this top fraction and we're dividing it by the bottom fraction. So it would be the square root of 3 minus 1 over the square root of 3. When you divide, you just flip them. 1 plus the square root of 3 over square root of 3 times, and flip this one. The square root of 3 over the square root of 3 minus 1. Now I can cancel out, and I have left 1 plus the square root of 3 over the square root of 3 minus 1. Remember how we don't like radicals in the denominator. So really what you should do is you should get rid of that radical. So in order to do that, you would want to multiply by the square root of 3 plus 1. And the square root of 3 plus 1. What you do to the bottom, you have to do in the top. Don't be prejudiced. All right, so now if I go ahead and FOIL on the top, I've got the square root of 3, and then 1 and 1 plus 1, square root of 3 and square root of 3 is 3, and then square root of 3 and 1 is plus the square root of 3. On the bottom, square root of 3 and square root of 3 is 3. Here you're going to have plus square root of 3. Here you're going to have negative square root of 3. That was the whole point. Get rid of the square root. And then minus 1. So our final answer, make some more room. All right, so our final answer, collect what we have on top. So I've got 2 square root of 3 plus 4 all over, right here, these two cancel out, all over 2. Notice we can take out a 2. 2 square root of 3 plus 2 all over 2, so that I can cancel these. My final answer is the square root of 3 plus 2. Okay, it's your turn, so go ahead and pause and I'll put the answer. Okay, so here's the final answer. Of course, if you wanted to, you could multiply both the top and the bottom by the square root of 2 to get your radical out. I'm not going to bother with that right now. All right, next one we're going to do, here's where you're finding exact values. And what I found with this one, the easiest way is to just take it the way it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use, it says use cosine x plus y. And so, well, first let's figure out what we got. So what I do is I'm going to draw my coordinates. I've got the sine of x is 3/5. The sine of x equals 3 over 5. And then I've got the cosine of y is 4/5. Okay, now it says x is an angle, so the sine of x is an angle in quadrant 2, so this is going to be x. And then the y, the cosine of y, is an angle in quadrant 1. So that's what I need to think about. So one of the things you think about with the x, if that's in quadrant 2, that means your x is going to be negative. Okay, so here's what we have. Sine of x is y over r. So we've got y equals 3, we've got r equals 5, so therefore x is going to be equal to x squared plus 3 squared equals 5 squared. So x squared plus 9 equals 25. So we've got x equals 25 minus 9 is 16, and the square root of 16 is 4, plus or minus. Remember, we're in quadrant 2, so it's going to be negative 4. That gives me my values there. Now let's go to the cosine and find out my values. Cosine is x over r, so I've got x equals 4, r equals 5, and I need to figure out y. So I've got 4 squared plus y squared equals 5 squared. 16 plus y squared equals 25. If you subtract 16 from 25, you get 9, so you got y equals plus or minus 3. We're in quadrant 1, so y is a positive 3. Okay, now that we've got that, let's shrink this down a bit so I can have a little bit more space. Okay, so now what I need is the cosine of x plus y. And remember, cosine of x plus y, it's not social. It's the cosine of x cosine of y minus the sine of x sine of y. Okay, so what we said is we need to figure out what these values are going to be. So the cosine of x, we've got the sine of x. So the cosine is going to be x, which is negative 4 over our r, which is 5. And then the cosine of y we already have, which is 4/5, minus, now we need the sine of x. We have that, which is 3/5. And now we need the sine of y, and sine is y over r, so it's going to be 3/5. We end up with negative 16 over 25 minus 9 over 25, which is going to give you, 25, not 9, which is going to give you negative 25 over 25. Therefore, the answer is negative 1. Okay, so these are the two methods you can use. It's totally up to you what you want to use. I just like to use a triangle because it seems simple to me. All right, so now in problem 3, this is what you're going to do. I'm going to pause. Go ahead and try it. Okay, here's how I did the problem. The quadrants tell you what your values are going to be for your x and y. Okay, let's go to number 10. Example number 4. Example number 4, we need to identify or do the verification. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the verification for this one. All right, so here we go. We've got the cosine of x minus y all over the cosine of x sine of y. Cosine of x minus y, that's going to be our difference identity. So we've got the cosine of x cosine of y plus the sine of x sine of y all over the cosine of x sine of y. And now I'm just going to split them up. So I've got the cosine of x cosine of y all over the cosine of x sine of y plus the sine x sine y all over cosine x sine y. Now I'm just going to cancel out stuff. Cosine x, sine y. What I have left is the cosine of y over the sine of y plus the sine of x over the cosine of x. And cosine over sine is going to be your cotangent of y, plus sine over cosine is your tangent of x. Okay, so there's the answer to that. This next one is problem 4. This is for you to do, so I'm going to go ahead, let you pause, and I'll show you how I did it. Okay, so here's problem 4. I hope you got it, and now to your homework. Good luck with your homework. It's really important that you try. That's the only way that you're going to get identities.